Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. We ended off the previous track by quoting the Shaykh's words where he's talking about Islam being in between the two extremes from various angles. So the message is that in Islam we do not go to extreme forms, but at the same time we do not compromise on principles. So we are in a happy middle ground. So on one end of the extreme there is doing something too much or to an extreme level, and on the other end of the extreme we have being guilty of a shortfall. So somebody who prays night and day continuously and does not do anything else, then he is going to extremes. But a person who does not perform his 5 times prayer, which is the minimum, then this is the other end of the extreme. So when it comes to al-ghulu, going to extreme or doing something too much, then the Khawarij are guilty of this. Who say that a Muslim who commits major sins and does not repent is a kafir. But on the other end, we have the Murji'ah guilty of taqsir, which is a shortfall. They say that a Muslim who commits major sins has complete and perfect Iman. So you see there are two ends of the extremes. One is ghulu and the other one is taqsir. When it comes to the attributes of Allah, one end of the extreme is tashbih, saying that the attributes of Allah resemble that of the humans. And the other end is ta'til, which is to completely deny or strip Allah from His attributes. When it comes to al-qadr, we have the Jabariyah and Qadariyah. The Jahmiyah, Asha'ira and Maturidiyah are from the Jabariyah sect when it comes to Qadr. And then we have the Mu'tazila who are from the Qadariyah. They say that man creates his own actions. And then we have Aman and Ya's, feeling safe from the punishment of Allah, and Ya's, which is despairing the mercy of Allah. So again, both of these are extremes, and Ahlul Sunnah in the happy middle. This ummah is meant to be a moderate nation. Clear-cut ayah from Surah Al-Baqarah, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا لِتَكُونُوا شُهَدَاءَ عَلَى النَّاسِ وَيَكُونَ الرَّسُولُ عَلَيْكُمْ شَهِيدًا. Thus we have made you into a middle or a moderate nation, that you may be a witness against mankind. So wasat means something which is just, as opposed to injustice, and khiyar, which is the best of nations. And justice does lie in the middle. It never lies in the extremes. In the Sahih, the Prophet ﷺ said, وَإِيَّاكُمْ وَالْغُلُوِ فَإِنَّمَا أَهْلَكَ مَنْ كَانَ قَبْلَكُمْ الْغُلُوِ. Be aware of going to extremes or excess, because it is only excess which destroyed those who were before you. So this ghulu can be in your aqidah, but it can also be in your amal or your ibadah, your physical actions. The opposite of al-ghulu is at-taqsir, which is when you leave that which you are ordered to do. And this happens when you follow or obey your desires rather than the order of Allah. So not praying would be taqsir, and praying too much night and day and not having time for anyone or anything else, that would be al-ghulu. Al-ghulu can make its way in jihad as well, so that people will fight those whom you are not permitted to fight. And this is one of the mistakes of the Khawarij. They killed Uthman and Ali radiallahu anhuma because of this ghulu that they had. The Prophet said about the Khawarij in the Sahih, يَقْتُلُونَ أَهْلَ الْإِسْلَامِ وَيَدَعُونَ أَهْلَ الْأَوْثَانِ. They will kill the people of Islam and they will leave alone the people of the idols. So this is one of the traits, or if you like, the hallmarks of the Khawarij, is that they will even fight the Muslims, particularly the Muslim ruler. They have this idea of rebelling and revolting against rulers because they do not deem them to be fit. This is a straight out-and-out hallmark of the Khawarij. Okay, let's go through the list of what the Shaykh mentioned. He says that the Ahlul Sunnah are between tashbih and ta'til. Now the Shaykh uses the word tashbih, however it is better to use the word tamthil, because this is the word used in the Quran. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. What's the difference? Well, the difference with tamthil is that if you reject at-tamthil, you are rejecting a likeness from all angles. Whereas with tashbih, you are rejecting a likeness from not all angles, but most angles. But the point is, when it comes to the attributes, then we do share the original meaning. So for example, we have hands and Allah has hands. The word hand, in its original meaning, the word hand, we share that with Allah Jalla wa Ala. So the original meaning is shared. So there is something in common. But what is not shared is the how of it, the kayfiyah. How does this hand manifest? That is not shared. So that's why there is a resemblance from one angle. And if that's the case, then we ought to use the word tamthil. Why is this? Because if there is a likeness from a particular angle, which we have just mentioned, then that means that there is some tashbih. But we say that Allah is not like us from all angles, so therefore there will not be any tamthil. If Allah Jalla wa Ala was like us from every single angle, then there would be tamthil. We have hearing, Allah has hearing, but the hearing of Allah is perfect, whereas our hearing is not perfect. So there's a great difference between our hearing and the hearing of Allah, as Allah's hearing is perfect. Likewise with all other characteristics. However, the original meaning of the word hearing is the same for our hearing and the hearing of Allah. The original meaning is the same, but the perfection of the meaning is not the same, because Allah's hearing is perfect, ours is not perfect. We have strength, Allah has strength, but Allah has perfect strength, our strength is deficient. So there's no similarity when it comes to the perfection of the attribute. However, there is similarity when it comes to the original or the basic meaning of the word strength. That much we do share with Allah, but that's it though, nothing above that. We do not share the perfection of this strength, neither do we share the manifestation of this strength. Our strength manifests in certain ways, which we are familiar with, and the strength of Allah manifests in different ways to ours. Now that is something which we cannot comprehend nor fathom. Ta'til, on the other hand, is literally to make something empty, and what we are referring to here is to make Allah empty of His attributes. And this is the work of the Jahmiyyah, Mu'tazila and Asha'ira. Even if the Asha'ira and Mu'tazila do affirm some characteristics, the Jahmiyyah are more strict. They deny all characteristics. There is another madhab, which is the Mufawwidah, from tafweed, which is when you leave a matter to someone else. They simply say that these attributes, we don't know what they mean, and we will not delve into this matter. So the hearing of Allah, we don't know what it means. Therefore we will not delve into this matter. We leave the affair up to Allah. And this is also wrong and misguidance, because the Quran came in the Arabic language, and the words in the Arabic language have meaning. So we have to affirm the meaning, there's no doubt. So what the Ahlul Sunnah affirm is the presence of these characteristics, not the kayfiyah, the how of it. How do these attributes manifest? Okay, the second point he mentions is that the Ahlul Sunnah are between Jabr and Qadr. And we have spoken about these two sects before, and within each of these sects there are those in the extreme and there are the moderates. So with the Jabariyah, there are those who say that the servant is controlled completely, and from them are those who say that he is inwardly or from the inside controlled, but outwardly it appears that he is performing his actions through his own will. From the Qadariyah, there are the extremes. They say that Allah does not even know what will happen before it takes place. And also we have the moderates from them who say that Allah does not create the actions of the servant, and that Allah does not will a servant to do what he is doing. Then the next point he mentioned was the Aman and Ya's. So the Ahlul Sunnah do not feel safe from the punishment of Allah, but at the same time they do not despair of the mercy of Allah. Because if you feel safe from the punishment of Allah, then you will commit sins and not feel any regret and contrition. But on the other hand, if you feel despair, then you will be thinking badly of Allah Jalla wa Ala. So the point is, you have to have fear of Allah, but it must not lead you to despair. Likewise, you must have hope in Allah, but it must not lead you into feeling safe from the punishment of Allah and His retribution. Now at this point there is a debate, which one should you have more, hope or fear? And what seems to be the most sensible opinion is that when you are healthy, then you should have more fear than hope, because when you are healthy you are more likely to commit sins and feel overconfident that Allah is not going to punish you, as is the case with humans generally. When you are in a case of illness, then you should have more hope than fear, because in a state of illness you're less likely to be feeling overconfident and less likely therefore to commit sins, and you hope that Allah Jalla wa Ala will restore you to health, so it is better to have more hope than fear. And when you are on your deathbed or nearer to dying, then you should have them both in equal measure. We have an evidence authentically from At-Tirmidhi that the Prophet ﷺ visited a young man and he was about to die, so he was on his deathbed. He asked him, كيف تجدك? How do you find yourself? And he replied, إني أرجو الله وَإِنِّي أَخَافُ ذُنُوبِي. Verily I hope in Allah, but I also fear my sins. To which the Prophet replied, لا يجتمعان في قلب عبد في مثل هذا الموطن إلا أعطاه الله ما يرجو وآمنه مما يخاف. These two qualities do not come together in the heart of a servant in this place, meaning on the deathbed, except that Allah will give him what he hopes for and keep him safe from what he fears. Then the Shaykh says, فَهَذَا دِينُنَا وَاعْتِقَادُنَا ظَاهِرًا وَبَاطِنًا وَنَحْنُ بُرَآءُ إِلَى اللَّهِ مِنْ كُلِّ مَا خَالَفَ الَّذِي ذَكَرْنَا وَبَيَّنَّا. This is our deen and our belief system, outwardly and inwardly, and we are free to Allah from anything which opposes what we have mentioned and made clear. Now, as you can probably tell, the Shaykh is now wrapping up this Aqidah treatise and saying that this is our deen, outwardly and inwardly. Well, inwardly because we do not harbour any nifaq, because the munafiq will have a different belief inwardly and outwardly display something else. But he's saying that even outwardly this is our belief being displayed, and this is the default position about your Aqidah, is that you openly declare it. Unless it be the case that there is fitna, where if you openly declared it, you may be attacked by the authority. And indeed, we are free from anything which opposes this Aqidah. We know that in the particular matter of Iman, the Shaykh rahimahullah did not include actions as part of Iman, and he followed the way of the Murji'atul Fuqaha in that respect, which is not the way of the Ahlul Sunnah. And we hope Allah Jalla wa Ala will overlook these faults which can happen from any scholar. Otherwise, we know that this is the Aqidah of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, and it is a blessed Aqidah. Indeed, this treatise is a blessed treatise. And what testifies to that is that it is still being studied to this day and age, centuries after his death. And it is worthy to note that just because a scholar makes a mistake in the Aqidah, in a few issues here and there, does not mean that he's not from Ahlul Sunnah. And neither does it mean that his book is not worthy to be studied. Because you find many a great book containing certain errors. Imam Muslim and Al-Hafiz Ibn Hajar have written the explanations of Sahih Muslim and Sahih Al-Bukhari respectively. They made mistakes in the attributes of Allah in their explanations, but that does not mean that these books are not worthy to be read. We find many examples which scholars make their ijtihad and make a mistake in particular matters. It does not mean that they are not people of Ahlul Sunnah. Neither does it mean that their books should be burnt, as has been suggested by some overzealous students of knowledge. Then the Shaykh says, وَنَسْأَلُ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى أَن يُثَبِّتَنَا عَلَى الْإِيمَانِ. We ask Allah to keep us firm on Iman, وَيَخْتِمَ لَنَا بِهِ, and to end our lives with it, وَيَعْصِمَنَا مِنَ الْأَهْوَاءِ الْمُخْتَلِفَةِ, and to protect us from different desires, وَالْآرَاءِ الْمُتَفَرِّقَةِ, from various opinions, وَالْمَذَاهِبِ الرَّدِيَّةِ, and from the fallen madhahib, مثل المشبهة والمعتزلة والجهمية والجبرية والقدرية وغيرهم, such as the Mushabbiha and Mu'tazila and Jahmiya and Jabariya and Qadariya and other than them. من الذين خالفوا السنة والجماعة, from those who have opposed the Sunnah and the Jama'ah. وحالفوا الضلالة, and they have become allies with misguidance. ونحن منهم براء, and we are free of them. وهم عندنا ضلال وأردياء وبالله العصمة والتوفيق, and our position about them is that they are misguided and have fallen, and with Allah is protection and tawfiq. Matters of the Aqidah are primarily pertaining to the heart, which is called the qalb, and qalb in Arabic means to turn or to change, and the heart changes. This is the point. So we have to ask Allah Jalla wa Ala not to change our hearts from the truth to misguidance, as has happened to so many millions of people. And in the authentic hadith we find, Ya muqallib al-qulub sarrif qulubana ala ta'atik. O the one who turns the hearts, direct our hearts to your obedience. And in the Sunan, Ya muqallib al-qulub thabbit qalbi ala dinik. O the one who turns hearts, keep my heart firm on your deen. And the point about your heart changing is that your heart is the king and the rest of your body are the soldiers, and the king orders the soldiers. So when your heart changes, your actions will change accordingly. good for good, evil for evil. So if you want sound and righteous actions, then make sure you have a sound and righteous aqidah. This is why the aqidah is called al-fiqh al-akbar, the biggest type of fiqh or understanding. You notice the Shaykh ends this treatise by making dua that we may die upon Iman, so upon this right guidance. And if you take a look at the first dua made in the Quran, it is Ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim, guide us to the straight path. That is, of course, Islam, and it is the greatest dua, because if you're guided, then you literally need nothing more. So our strong recommendation is to learn the correct aqidah and to ask Allah Jalla wa Ala to keep you firm, and never feel safe that you may not fall into the wrong type of belief or practice. We find Ibrahim alayhi salam saying, وَجَنُبْنِي وَبَنِيَّ أَن نَعْبُدَ الْأَصْنَامِ, and make me and my children avoid worshipping the idols. So even Ibrahim alayhi salam felt that there was a chance that he could fall into shirk, and he never felt truly safe. So if that's the case with him, then how about us? Okay, so for the final time in this presentation, let us take some talking points. The first one, the importance of making dua, especially when it comes to matters pertaining to the deviated sects, because it is so easy for any one of us to fall into their deviancy. Just as they themselves fell into deviancy, so can we. So the importance of making dua, just as the Shaykh does at the end of his treatise. Dua to keep you firm upon the straight path. The second point is that you are asking Allah Jalla wa Ala to keep you firm on Iman. Now this is the firm on the initial Iman, and also being firm on the complete Iman, because they're not the same thing. Even the deviated sects have Iman, but they do not have the complete Iman. So anyone who rejects the attributes of Allah, he certainly has Iman, but we cannot say he has complete or perfected Iman. Thirdly, we take from the speech of the Shaykh is that he asks for our lives to end on Iman. And this is vital because your deeds are judged by the last of them. And we know from the famous hadith where a servant does actions of the people of Jannah until there is just a forearm length away from him and Jannah, but the kitab overtakes him, so what has been decreed for him overtakes him, and then he performs actions of the people of Jahannam and enters into it. And the hadith goes on saying that a person does the actions of the people of the fire until he has just a forearm away from him and the fire. Then the kitab, or this decree, overtakes him and he does the actions of the people of Jannah and enters it. So the point is that your deeds are judged by the last of them. We also have in Sahih a man fighting courageously in the way of Allah, and the Prophet says that he is from the people of fire. And it so transpires that he is injured in the battle and cannot keep patient, and he kills himself. So look at this then, an evil action right after a righteous action. So be aware and make dua against an evil ending to your life. And not just dua, but you will defend yourself from an evil ending by rectifying your heart. And you do this with beneficial knowledge, such as of the aqidah, which is what we have been discussing all along, but also of fiqh and tafsir and pondering over the Quran, reflecting over the ayat. All of these prepare your heart to become righteous. And then secondly, the amal, your physical actions. You implement your knowledge physically and outwardly in this world, so that you rectify your actions. So then, you have rectified your heart and your actions. The next talking point, the Shaykh asks Allah Jalla wa Ala to protect us from the different types of desires and opinions. Total protection from sin is for the Prophet and not for us. So we, no doubt, are going to commit sins. So we are not ma'asumeen. You can have sins in your aqidah and sins in your actions. So sins in your aqidah would be the bid'ah type of aqidah, like what we have been talking about throughout this presentation. The Sahaba were protected from the bid'ah type of aqidah. So Allah Jalla wa Ala did make the Sahaba ma'sumun with regards to deviant aqidah. Then we can also have the sins of the actions. This is when you do something you're not supposed to do, or do not do something you're supposed to do. The Sahaba were not protected from that. We know the Sahaba fell into sins. We know some fell into major sins. So what the Shaykh is asking here, it cannot be the complete usma, because we know that cannot be the case. We cannot be angels. What the Shaykh is asking for here is protect us from these deviancies, meaning keep us on the path of the aqidah of the Prophet and the Sahaba and the Tabi'een, who did not have deviancy in their aqidah. And then he enlists some of these deviated sects. He says the mushabbihah, And these are the people who say that the attributes of Allah resemble that of humans. Whatever these attributes are, sifa fi'liya or sifa dhatiyya. These can also be called mumathila or mujassima, from jism. So it means they're giving Allah Jalla wa Ala a jism, a body just like the human body. Because they're saying the attributes of Allah are like human attributes. The reason they give for their belief is that the Quran came down in the Arabic language, so the words are to be understood in the way we understand them in the Arabic language, and so we understand what these descriptions mean. So there's no need to say that these descriptions, we don't know how they manifest, because we do know how they manifest. We see them manifesting on ourselves. So therefore the attributes of Allah are just like our attributes. But of course, this is not a valid argument because we do know what the words mean. Like we said before, we only share with Allah the basic meaning of the word. We do not share the perfection of the meaning of this word. So our hands are not perfect, but the hands of Allah are perfect. And we also do not share in the manifestation of this meaning. Our hands manifest differently to the hands on a clock. The second hand, minute hand, and hour hand, these are hands, but look how differently they manifest. And he mentions the Mu'tazilah. These people are followers of a man called Amr ibn Ubaid and of a man called Wasil ibn Ata. These two men were students of Al-Hasan al-Basri. But when they entered into a discussion about the names of Allah and about matters pertaining to the one who commits major sins and about those of the Sahaba who fought each other, then these two men, Amr ibn Ubaid and Wasil ibn Ata, went away or segregated themselves away from Al-Hasan al-Basri. And this is what i'tizal means, to draw oneself away. And so Al-Hasan al-Basri was asked about these two men and he said, those are the Mu'tazila, meaning they have drawn away. And so this is where the name comes from, Mu'tazila, those who have drawn away. And then after that, the followers of Amr ibn Ubaid and Wasil ibn Ata increased in number. And the Mu'tazila have 5 fundamentals or 5 usul in their madhab. And these are, number 1, at-tawheed, number 2, al-adl, which is justice, number 3, al-wa'ad wal-wa'id, which is promise of Jannah, and wa'id, warning against the punishment. Number 4 is al-manzila bayn al-manzilatayn, a station between the two stations. That means to say, when a person who commits a major sin is neither a mu'min nor a kafir, so he's in between the two, but in the hereafter, he will be in Jahannam forever. And number 5, al-amr bil-ma'ruf wal-nahyu 'anil munkar, enjoining the good and forbidding the evil. However, do not be fooled. When they talk about tawheed, what they really mean is denying the attributes of Allah Jalla wa Ala, though they affirm the names. So they would say that Allah is al-basir without basar. So he is the seer, but he does not see. He is the alim without ilm. He is the knowledgeable, but he does not have the characteristic of knowledge, and so on. This is tawheed for them. As for adl, justice, what they mean is the denial of qadr, that Allah Jalla wa Ala can never mislead somebody and then punish them. So they deny the qadr. This is adl for them, this is justice. As for enjoining the good and forbidding the evil, sounds nice, but for them it is rebelling against an evil ruler. Now these people give precedence to their own intellect rather than the text, and this is what their usul are based upon. They say this is what our intellects determine. And so even when it comes to matters of the unseen, they will speak about it using their intellects, not using the text. If anything, they say that the text must follow their intellect, and not the other way around. Even within the Mu'tazila, there are various diverse opinions, but they agree on the fundamental 5 issues. It's just the details they disagree on. Then thirdly, the Shaykh mentions the Jahmiyyah. They take their name from Jahm ibn Safwan. He was a knowledgeable person, but he would involve himself too much in debates, until one time he got into a debate with some atheists from India. And we made mention of his argument, and that he went down this batil route of using attributes, that everything you see has attributes, and they're not the same. These attributes can change. So it means there is an outside force which is giving that particular body its attributes. And even though he convinced those particular atheists with this argument, they asked him, okay, describe to us your Rabb then. So now he could not describe this Rabb of his with any of the attributes which Allah describes Himself with, because then that would mean that there needs to be an external source, external to Allah, who has given Allah these attributes. And so this is what led him to denying the attributes of Allah Jalla wa Ala. Even if he did convince his antagonists with this batil argument, but it does not make the argument sound. The upshot of it all is that he ended up saying that apart from existence, Allah Jalla wa Ala does not have any other attributes. As for the names, then they say they are merely titles from which no descriptions can be taken. So if we say Allah is Al-Kareem, they will say that this karm, or this kindness, if you like, is a creation of Allah, which He then bestows on His servant. He is Kareem to them, or kind to them. Likewise, if Allah is Al-Qawi, the strong, then this Quwwah is a creation of Allah. So it is not His attribute, as the attributes of Allah are not created. So the reality of the matter is that the Jahmiyyah actually deny the names and attributes of Allah. At least the Asha'ira would affirm some attributes. The Mu'tazila would affirm the names but not the attributes. The Jahmiyyah are the most extreme in this matter. They deny the names and the attributes. And another group of them will say that these are just titles referring to the same thing. Because in Arabic, for example, the word for sword is Sayf, but you can also call it Hassam or Muhannad. These are also words for sword. They're referring to the same thing. Just mere titles referring to the same essence. And that's how they view the names of Allah. With regards to Iman, the Jahmiyyah are Murji'ah, so they do not include actions as part of your Iman. In fact, they go to quite some extreme. They say just knowing Allah is perfect for your Iman. Just knowing that He exists. So upon this, Fir'aun and Iblis will also be mu'min, because they knew Allah. So they do not say that Fir'aun and Iblis are kuffar because they did not have Iman. Because they do say that these two had Iman, but they make takfir because both of these disobeyed the order of Allah. With matters of the qadr, they are Jabariyah. They say man has no free will. And in matters of the unseen, they reject anything which does not accord with their intellect and their rationality. As for Jannah and Jahannam, they say that both of these will cease to exist at some point in time. And again, they're using the intellect here. They say, how can a person who committed kufr for a limited number of years be in Jahannam forever? And likewise, a person who does righteous actions for a limited number of years be in Jannah forever. The Mu'tazila, they also have a deviant opinion regarding this. They say that Jannah and Jahannam as a place will cease to exist, but not the pleasure or pain itself. And then the Shaykh mentions Al-Jabariyah, and we have mentioned who they are. They simply say that man has no free will. He is forced into doing what he does. We have the extreme amongst them, and then we have the easier going amongst them, such as the Asha'ira. They say that inwardly man is forced, but outwardly he chooses to do what he's doing. So it's like outwardly you feel you have a choice, but inwardly and secretly you are being forced to choose what you are choosing. And then he also mentions the Al-Qadariyah. We have spoken about them as well. They are the opposite to the Jabariyah. The extreme form amongst them denied the antecedent knowledge of Allah. However, most of them do not deny this. Rather, they deny that Allah creates the actions of the servant and wills these actions to happen. About the extreme forms of them, Al-Imam Shafi'i said, argue with them using knowledge of Allah. If they deny that Allah has knowledge of an event before it happens, then they have become kuffar. And if they admit that, then they have lost the argument. The extreme forms of this Qadariyah appeared during the time of the Sahaba, but nowadays you do not find them too much, if at all. Rather, more prominent are the lighter forms of the Qadariyah who deny the creation of Allah, that Allah creates the actions of the servant and wills them to happen. The Qadariyah have been called the Majus of this Ummah because the Majus believe in lightness and darkness. Light creates good and darkness creates evil. So they have two creators, and such are the Qadariyah. So they say Allah creates, yes, okay, fine, He creates, but also man creates. Man creates his actions. So you see, they've also assigned two creators. One is Allah and the other one is mankind in general. And then the Shaykh says, and other than them. So this includes just any other madhab which has fallen by the wayside and has departed from the Ahl Sunnah. Notice he did not particularly mention Al-Khawarij and Al-Shi'ah and the Murji'ah and many others, but he just says, and other than them. So that includes all other deviant ways and schools of thought. And in this present era, also it includes what we call the al-aqlaniyun. These are people who do not want to be governed by the law of Allah Jalla wa Ala. They are secularists. And we find people attributing themselves to Islam, so calling themselves Muslims, yet they want to be governed by secular rules and regulations and laws, where everyone is free to do whatever they want to. There's no enjoining the good, forbidding the evil. There's no unity in that sense, where everyone follows the same sharia. And so they just want to reduce Islam to your personal belief, which is just in your mind and in your home. The Shaykh mentions all those groups who have opposed the Sunnah. Opposing the Sunnah could be in terms of becoming a kafir, or it could be in terms of not being a kafir, still a Muslim, but being a person of bid'ah. The Shaykh then goes on to say, the one who has allied himself with dalala, with misguidance, and this is because it is in black and white. If you're not with the Sunnah, you are with dalala, and then vice versa. It's in black and white. And the next talking point is that the Shaykh, as he mentions, he frees himself from these people. This is obligatory upon the Muslim. You free yourself from the people of misguidance. Ibrahim alayhi salam and those with him, they said to the kuffar, Inna bura'a'u minkum. We are free from you. وَمِمَّا تَعْبُدُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ, and that which you worship besides Allah. So you see, they outwardly announced their freedom from such people and their ways. And this is what the Shahada is all about. The first utterance you make in the Shahada is a negation, because you are freeing yourself from any false deity. When you say La ilaha, the affirmation only comes afterwards. You have to free yourself first. You have to clean yourself first, because you clean something first, then you decorate it. So the point is, the one who sticks to the Sunnah is free of the bid'ah and shirk, and the one who sticks with the people of the Sunnah is free of the people of bid'ah and shirk.
Let us take some review questions. Question 1. What are 4 categories in which Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah is the middle and balanced way? Question number 2. Why is it so important to ask for guidance, meaning that your heart be guided? Question number 3. Explain how the Jahmiyyah sect arose and some of their basic beliefs pertaining to Qadr, Iman, attributes of Allah, and the infinitude of Jannah. What do they have to say about these matters?
And with this, we have come to the end of our audio presentation on Al-Aqidah Tahaawiyyah. We ask Allah Jalla wa Ala to have mercy on Al-Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi rahmatan wasi'ah. Wa sallallahu wa sallama wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammad.
Walhamdulillahi alladhi bi ni'matihi tatimmu as-salihat.